Welcome. So thank you all for coming along tonight. This webinar is run by the IUCN's National Committee UK's Education and Communication Working Group. My name is Sophie Stenson. I'm the chair of the working group, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you all today. For anyone new to the IUCN CEC, that's the Commission on Education and Communication. So as a UK working group, we work alongside the global CEC and its initiatives, and our mission is to strengthen the work of the Union through creative, innovative, participatory, responsive and effective communication and education. We want to share tools to effect positive social change for the well-being of people and planet. And one of our main ways of approaching that is creating a network to bring together individuals and organisations that are passionate about nature conservation and facilitate collaboration. So please feel free to share LinkedIn details or emails in the chat box if you'd like to connect. If you're interested in becoming a member of the CEC or any of the IUCN commissions, individual membership is completely free, and you can find out more by following the link that I'll share in the chat box. And there's also more information about the working groups on our website. So this webinar is just one in a series that we've been running over the last 3 weeks. And these are following on from the webinars that we ran last year. And there we discussed some of the big topics around nature communication and education in the UK today. And through that, we've started up several collaborations and had some fascinating discussions. And so we are really looking forward to our webinar for this evening, which is the third in our summer series of 3, focusing on EDI in conservation. So this evening, we'll be talking to a fantastic researcher from the Access project, Bethan Stagg, who I'm sure will be able to introduce all of her fascinating work to us this evening. So I'll hand over to you, Bethan.
Hi, thank you very much, Sophie. So I'm going to give a presentation about a project that we've been doing for the last year about social equity and urban biodiversity. And then there'll be an opportunity for discussion and questions. I'd just like to also introduce Fiona Blake, who is the Wilder Learning Officer at the Devon Wildlife Trust, and has also been very heavily involved in this project. So I look forward to having your input later on. So I'm going to share a presentation. Hopefully you can all see that's okay.
Yep, that's great. Thank you. Oh, that's
great.
Actually showing with the notes there as well. If you've got it.
Oh, it's shown with the notes. Oopsie.
Yeah.
Is that okay now?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, in that case, I'll I wonder if I can drag my notes over. Never mind, it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm a research fellow at the University of Exeter. I work across the School of Education and the School of Social Political Sciences. And the project that I'm going to talk to you about is, the title of the project is, Can a Novel Knowledge Co-Production Approach Advance Community Organisations' Ability to Harness the Social Sciences in Urban Biodiversity Renewal? And we're a partnership, just a 1-year partnership project. University of Exeter, Devon Wildlife Trust, Wilder Learning Programme, which comprises wildlife champions, Wilder schools and various offerings for schools across Devon. Zebra Collective, which is a community-embedded workers' cooperative focused on social and environmental justice and based in the area where this project takes place. Green Communities, which is a Plymouth City Council project, and it's an urban wilding project that's happening across three areas of Plymouth, including the area that we're focusing on with this project. And then we've got 2 schools, St Peter's CV Primary School and Marlborough Primary Academy, who have been involved in the project. Project is funded by Access. So Access is a 5-year climate and environment social science project funded by the ESRC. And we are one of 9 Flex Fund projects which are testing and developing new ways of thinking, new approaches, new networks to advance the impact of the social sciences to address the transition to a sustainable biodiverse environment and a net zero society. And there's the link to the website. So the project is based in Plymouth, down here in the southwest. And you'll see in this bottom southwest corner of Plymouth, in the red area, is Devon, and Stonehouse, which are adjacent neighbourhoods and are the most ethnically diverse in Plymouth and in the 10% most deprived areas in England. And this is where our project is based. So on to explain the rationale for the project first. So the benefits of nature experience are well established. We know now that there's a range of benefits for physical health, cognitive development, well-being, and of course spiritual and social benefits. But we also know that the communities with the lowest access to nature live in the most deprived neighbourhoods, and are from the most socially excluded groups. We know that people that visit nature are more likely to be from a low-income background or from an ethnic minority background, and to live in one of these areas of multiple disadvantage. So it's a serious social equity issue that is kind of where our project is coming from, basically. So why the focus on families in this project? So family is an important target for biodiversity renewal because childhood experiences, family values, influence pro-nature behaviours across the lifespan more than any other factors. So it's a really key point in somebody's life to connect with nature. We know, of course, that children are spending progressively less time in nature compared to previous generations, and so their opportunity to develop attachments to the natural world are diminishing. And finally, adults with young children are a very receptive audience. When we have young children, it's the time in our lives when we're quite adaptable, open to meeting new people, and having new experiences. Now, of course, the issue of social exclusion in nature is not a new problem. This is a study from 1993, Minority Environmental Activism in Britain, from Brixton to the Lake District. So this came out in 1993, and non-governmental organisations have been trying to address this problem, therefore, for decades. Around the time that this paper came out, I was volunteering for the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers in Croydon, which is where I grew up, in an area of high deprivation with high ethnic diversity. I went on to work for the Federation of City Farms and later on a UK-wide project in nature engagement called Open Air Laboratories. And something I noticed along the way is that in many environmental organisations, educational programs either focused on working with schools, just inside the schools, or targeting families outside of schools. The focus on schools has limited impact because it means the learning and actions that develop don't extend to the family. And it's also a shame because children can be powerful change agents and influences of other family members. And then the focus on families, in other words, family events taking places at nature reserves and natural areas around the country, tend to attract families that are already quite nature connected, and can actually be quite an uncomfortable experience for people from minoritized groups. And I speak from experience, knowing that my Asian husband would never take our son to one of these events unless he was with me. So what our project sought to do was to try and kind of bridge between these two engagement approaches, as it were. And it's important to mention, of course, it's not the only way of addressing this problem. We are one of very many projects that are successfully getting to grips with this issue. So one project highlight here, for example, is Generation Wild, the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust Nature Connection project, which is targeting underserved communities. And like our project, it starts with a school visit, except of course that's at the sites of the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, and then leads to various opportunities for family learning outside following that visit. We also have Race for Nature, which is a program of placements for young people with diverse backgrounds and environmental organisations. And this is trying to address the fact that the UK environmental sector is one of the least racially diverse professions in the UK. We've got a range of high-profile campaigners from minoritized groups that have made important progress, from Judy Ling Wong, who set up the Black Environmental Network in 1987, to Maya Rose Craig, and a variety of other important campaigners. So coming now on to our project, we've been piloting a stepping stone approach of progressive engagement, starting with biodiversity learning in schools, leading on to low risk opportunities for families to engage with deeper commitment along the way. So if you look on the right hand side, starts with class investigations, leading on to opportunities to share learning with families, and from there to after school sessions and knowledge co-production opportunities at the kind of top of our little ladder, as it were. And I've tried to show here how our different partners are involved in these different stages. So Devon Wildlife Trust, particularly Fiona, who has been instrumental in this project, has been involved at every stage of the project, alongside myself, the University of Exeter. And then we've got Zebra Collective, who've been particularly instrumental in the knowledge consultation, co-production stages, and Green Communities, who are very active in this area, and we've been collaborating with on some of the work with schools. And just to say a little bit about our conceptual model, so you may have heard of Arnstein's ladder of participation, which was an idea that emerged in the 60s and 70s, of this idea of moving up a ladder of progressive engagement in civic action, community action. Arnstein's ideas were at quite an early stage of development. He didn't really kind of develop the concept or look at how it might work in practice. So these guys, Hurlbut and Gupta, are particularly important for kind of fleshing out this concept and making it a lot more real world. And they've explored the conditions where community participation is most likely to work, and what it can achieve in different circumstances. And the reason why it's called the split ladder model is because they actually demonstrated that participation tends to go in one of four directions. So it's not just a kind of straight journey up one ladder. It can actually go in different directions according to the nature of the project, the nature of the people you're working with, and what everybody's looking to get out of it. So the partners in the project, we've been meeting regularly, and one of the aims has been to capture the learning and insights from this project in a kind of shared theory of change. And apologies, I've screenshot this from Miro, but it's not that easy to see. It's actually based on a broader theory of change, which our Green Communities partner have been working on for the focal areas in Plymouth. So this is just like a little subcategory of it. And what we've got to the inputs, we've got the expertise of the partners, the knowledge, skills, and so on of the families, the funding from Access. We've got our ways of working, the ways we're working with families, the ways we're gathering opinions and knowledge. And then we've got our short-term outcomes, which are in the lifetime of this project. More families participating in nature-related events, increasing families' interest in local biodiversities, and then, of course, the intermediate and long-term outcomes, which are more what our partners will hopefully get out of the project, and what will be kind of delivered by our partners going forwards. So the first step in our project were class investigations, curriculum linked sessions in school and in the school grounds, exploring ground invertebrates and wild plants on the whole. And those took place from October 2023 to March 2024. And you can see here Fiona with the children in the classroom, and then various activities taking place in the school grounds. And these were kind of fairly typical environmental education school sessions. That there was innovation, but this was a kind of fairly tried and tested part of the project, as it were. And then leading on from these sessions, we had kind of show and tell sessions after school where children could show family members what they'd been doing in these sessions, share the learning, and a way for families to start to get to know us, to get to know the project, and of course to start to take an interest in what children were doing in this project. We also had opportunities to share learning with families using activity packs. So these were packs that went home with children in school bags. And the idea was that these packs provided everything you needed to carry out a nature identification activity and a craft activity, everything from the paper to the glue to the ID sheet, to take part in with your family members. And then these led on to what's been the main part of the project, with the kind of most sustained participation, which has been a series of after school sessions taking place from January to June this year, which have just been very brief. They're just 1 hour long, happening immediately after the school day, again taking place on the school premises. And each of these sessions, we've tried to have kind of 3 elements: essentially a first-hand encounter with biodiversity, a craft activity, and then a consultation, community consultation or co-production activity. So this first slide shows those kind of first-hand encounters with biodiversity. So we've got things like potted wild plants. This is something I'm quite famous for, is potting up plants that are normally known as weeds in many cases, bringing them into school at the time of year where it's often just too wet to go outside, and just spending some time getting to know these. And then we've had microscopes looking at plants and invertebrates under the microscope, and making a perspex wormery where children can actually observe worms, earthworms, on a day-to-day basis. And as you can imagine, these have been very popular, these activities. And then in terms of the nature crafts, here's a couple of examples. So the first shows soil painting, so painting with different soils that have been collected from all around Devon. and also plant pigments. So grinding up plants in pestle and mortar, flowers as well, and getting different colours. So quite a simple activity, incredibly popular with children. And then we've got on the right hand side this bumblebee collage, a kind of accurate collage of a buff-tailed bumblebee, which was also very popular. So that's just kind of a couple of examples. And then coming on to the consultation activities. These were kind of bite-sized consultation activities, generally relying on kind of large boards, map boards and photo boards. So for example, voting for the types of nature spaces that you find most attractive or most appealing, a map of the local area where families can share their experiences of which spaces they're going to and what they do there. And then a kind of typical lots of pens, post-its, a chance to, you know, get creative and kind of share ideas. So the way these after school sessions have worked, they've just been very short, just 1 hour, as I mentioned. Families rotate around 3 activity stations, essentially. So you've got the kind of direct encounter with nature, the craft activity, and then the community consultation, and families can kind of move around those and spend a bit of time at each as they wish. And moving then on to the next stage of the project, we then had sessions that looked to move to a kind of deeper form of engagement, where we were looking to go to other places with families, other places in the local area, and also start to think about how spaces could be improved for nature. And this idea of spaces for nature, it's both about spaces for nature in our local area, but also in our lives. So it's a kind of twofold idea, you know, spaces for nature, physically, geographically, but also in our kind of day-to-day lives and how we address that. And what we've had in this phase is a series of workshops with an organisation called Real Ideas, which are also based in this part of Plymouth. We had children taking 360-degree photographs of their local areas, mainly the school grounds. So you can see that in the first image. And then the next stage was uploading those 360-degree photographs onto a laptop. And then looking at those images and drawing a template to fit onto that photograph. So what you can see in the third photo is one of the children's drawings, one of their pieces of artwork, to kind of show the space with kind of improvements for wildlife. And we had an event just a couple of days ago in the amazing immersive dome in Devonport at Market Hall. And I really recommend, if you haven't been there and if you do live in the Southwest, to visit it. It really is an incredible space. And what we had here was the presenting of the children's 360-degree photographs and videos, and then the artwork that they put on top. So what you can see in this left-hand photo is basically a giant child, what parts of their video that they took in the school grounds, and then their ideas for nature on top, which is a kind of insect hotel with kind of logs and holes drilled in the logs, and kind of ideas like that for mining bees. So a really incredible medium to work with, this digital technology that was really very successful. So moving on now to kind of just summarize some of our kind of lessons learned, you know, what has worked well, what hasn't worked so well. What has worked really well was the format of these after school sessions. So this idea of just short sessions on the school grounds immediately after you pick up the kids from school. These have had very good uptake. We've had typically 40 children and their adults come into these sessions. They've been very popular. So that's worked really well. What has also been really effective is our direct encounters with biodiversity. And as anyone that knows me will be aware, lots of my research focuses on plants and engagement plants. And plants and soil invertebrates are incredibly good groups to focus on in an educational context because they're very accessible, they're very reliable. In even the most urban area in the middle of winter, we were able to find a whole variety of different invertebrate orders and taxa, and incredibly engaging, don't require kind of expensive field work or sampling skills. So I really think that focus on invertebrates and plants is incredibly rich. I think what has been also really important strength in the project is understanding how schools work. Fiona is a former head teacher, so understands kind of how schools operate in great detail. I've been working with schools for years, so between us, we had kind of very good understanding of challenges we might face, the kind of areas of the curriculum that schools are most likely to want covered from outside partners, and just the kind of constraints and opportunities that you have within schools. And I think what's really important to stress is that we've had genuine engagement from underserved communities in this project. It really has been incredible. Kind of we've had family members that have just never done something like this, so that's been tremendously exciting. And what has been incredibly valuable is the main school we worked with, St. Peter's CV Primary School, have just been very passionate about the project, and are just really passionate about extending opportunities for the children and families at that school, basically providing lots of extracurricular opportunities that give children experiences that they just wouldn't have otherwise. So that's been kind of really important, is our work with St. Peter's and just how supportive they've been. And then thinking about some of the challenges we faced. So the key one is engaging families the other side of the school gate. So engagement on the kind of familiar territory of the school grounds has been very successful. But when we organise events out of school, then we get much lower participation, and kind of face different challenges there. So, for example, we did organise a field trip to a nearby local woods, but participation was much lower than some of those school events, but nonetheless kind of brought a richness of experience that has been an important part of the project. The constraints facing primary school. So our other school that we worked with has particular constraints. Marlborough Community School just didn't have quite the capacity or resources of our other school, and of course that's always a challenge for primary schools. It's just the inputs it takes to kind of work with external partners, and then the constraints facing families is really important to mention. A lot of families in low income areas are going to be shift workers, for example. A number of our families had parents that would be working at weekends or immediately after school, so weren't able to take part in the projects often as they'd like. Our project's based on an engagement, a type of development called asset-based community development. And this is a process for mapping and mobilizing participants' assets, such as knowledge and networks, to address a specific social challenge, which in this case has been around nature engagement, biodiversity renewal. What we have realized is whilst these short after school sessions are great for engagement, you are limited what you can do in terms of the co-production within that length of time. So the asset-based community development hasn't kind of unfolded to the extent we'd like to, but this is going to be the focus of our final stage of the project. So that's everything from me. and I've got all the references there if anybody wants to look up any of those studies, and then links to all the projects and organisations that I've mentioned. So I'm going to hand back over to Sophie now, and we can start to take questions, comments, reflections, and so on from everybody that's attending. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Bethan. Yeah, if anyone would like to ask a question in the chat box at this point, I'd be happy to read that out, or alternatively, if you put your hands up, and I'll do my best to kind of address those questions in order. As Bethan mentioned, we've also got Fiona here with us as well. So if there are any direct questions for Fiona, we can kind of direct those as well. I couldn't see, I'm not sure whether Mark has arrived. Can't see Mark Gardner in the participants there, but
don't worry, me and Fee will be able to cope with any questions, hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I haven't spotted him, he can make himself known, but there we go. Okay. So I can see one question's popped up in the chat there, from Alex. It says, how many students are you engaging with on average during the after school sessions?
Yes, so it's not just the students that come, it's the students come with their parents or other adults. And typically we have 40 people, between 30 and 40, come into an after school session. So it would be probably what would that be, about 10 to 20 children, and then yeah, it tends to be kind of child and their sibling who might be like lower or higher in the school, and then generally one parent or other adult with them. And what I forgot to mention actually is we've been focusing mainly on key stage 1, so year 1 and year 2, with the in-school sessions, but obviously with the after-school sessions, that's kind of open to any families in the school.
Brilliant. And so we've got another question from Zora as well in the chat. They're saying, what actions did you take to make the activities inclusive for all children of all abilities?
Sure, yeah, that's a really good question actually, and I might hand over to Fee in a moment to say some of the things that I'm probably going to miss. So I guess both Fee and myself are teachers and used to kind of working with children. So one way is that with any activity, we'd have a kind of central activity that everybody would be doing, but then we'd have some opportunity for an additional challenge, a kind of stretch challenge for children to move on to if they've kind of got to grips with the core activity. I think what's also really inclusive about the kind of activities we've been focusing on is this focus on first-hand encounters with nature. So something that's very important in this project is immersive experience with biodiversity. So it's not about kind of filling out lots of activity sheets, and it's not a kind of knowledge-rich session. It's much more kind of multi-sensory, experience nature with senses, and kind of just spending time with a ground beetle or an earthworm, watching how they move, just learning by experiencing basically, which tends to be very effective for reaching children of all abilities. Did you want to add anything, Fee?
Yes, I think that, when we came to, there were some activities that did involve some reading, and, Bethan and I both have lots of experience of children of different ages. So the younger children, obviously we would sit with them and read through it, or help them, be with them just to make sure they understood what they had to do. And some of the other craft activities, we made sure that, if there was cutting with the very young children, they would struggle to cut that. So we had some already pre-cut for them so that everybody could be included. But I think, as Bethan says, is immersing them in the nature that is in their area, because what I found is so many of the children didn't realize it was there, and it was just wonderful excuse me, to see how much joy they got out of these activities. And then when we worked with them in the afternoon sessions, and then we had the family session straight after, the children were so enthused about everything they had done, and they wanted to get their parents in. And I think that then encouraged the parents who did come to our weekend events. But it was really amazing to do. So yeah, I think we did the inclusion very well.
Something to add as well, which was really nice, was the way older children would help younger children in the after school sessions. So I remember, for example, our earthworm wormery activity, we were just expecting a few children. We had about 20 children all kind of gathered around this one wormery. And the older children were just incredible at helping the younger children and making sure that everybody had their turn. So there was some really nice, that's something you don't always get in school, is those opportunities for children to interact different ages.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've got a comment from Chris here in the chat as well. He says, really great to hear about the project. Were there any tweaks you made during the project to increase the uptake at events outside of school, or what would you do next time?
To be honest, it meant we shifted more to kind of staying in school and kind of staying with people's comfort zones and kind of what worked for them. Particularly because it was quite a short project. I think if it had been, say, a 2-year project, then I think we would have kind of made much more effort to kind of explore, getting kind of further afield. But we certainly did kind of play around a bit with, in terms of whether out of school events were on Saturday or Sunday, how we advertise them, whether it was a letter home from school or on the class app. Or just kind of how we promoted those to parents. So yes, we did kind of experiments in various ways. One way I think would be really effective that we didn't have time to do would be to just have a stand at pickup time, to just have a just very simple stand and hand out flyers to people. And something I think we could have done better is to actually publicise the out-school events at the in-school events. We tended to just be so rushed off our feet because we had such good uptake, just delivering the activities, that we often didn't, promote ourselves as much as we should have done.
Yeah, and so I can see that Mark has his hand up here as well.
Yeah, hi Bethan, Mark from WWT. I developed the Generation Wild programme, so thanks ever so much for featuring that. That was great, and your programme looks amazing. We'll have to talk after this about how we might be able to support each other, but my question really was, the families that engaged with the programme, did you get a sense of, were they the families that already engaged with nature, or were they families whose children have become passionate about it and then they kind of brought the parents in and gained their interest? Because that's what we always battle with, is, are we just talking to the same people?
No, that's what I think was really interesting compared to other projects that I've worked on over the years, is that this felt like a lot of the families that were coming were families that had just never done a nature-related activity before. But I would say there tended to be a trend of a developing passion in the child, which parents and other adults were picking up on and kind of keen to nurture. But I think that was interesting, was, it kind of wasn't the usual suspects, as it were. Yeah, so did you want to add anything, Fee?
I think that, some of the parents were genuinely interested, and I don't think they were aware of anything that that we showed them. So, and I think that one parent that we had at the very first one in January, she kind of helped spread the word as well within her community. And we had more of an uptake on the second family event. But I think, they are genuinely wanting to learn about what is around them. So, and as Bethan said, the children, once we'd done some work in class, they wanted to do more. So, it was great to encourage that, with the families as well.
And I think what we saw is families that hadn't lived in the area for very long, that had come from overseas and just recently moved to Plymouth, found the project quite valuable, for just in terms of, kind of getting to know the area a bit more, you know, kind of feeling a bit more grounded in the school. And I know that's something the schools were quite keen, was as a way of just getting families more involved in the school, you know, regardless of the kind of nature focus. So I think those after school sessions were particularly valuable for that, actually, because the great thing was you could just turn up for 5 minutes or stay for the whole hour. It was very low risk, you know, you could just kind of peek your head round the door as you were picking your child up, or, you know, you could come in for the full hour. And we really did see, you know, a kind of range of engagement in that sense.
Oh, thank you. It's absolutely brilliant what you've achieved.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And I'll skip to this question from the chat as well, because it's relevant to the parents. Jill is asking, do you experience any challenges with parents or other adults that have English as an additional language, and how did you include them?
Yes, that's a good question as well. So we've definitely had quite a number of families where English is an additional language. Sometimes it might be even be the third or fourth language that parents and children are encountering. I don't think it's been a particular problem. And again, because a lot of our activities are quite observation based or sensory, that they haven't always needed language. There's definitely been some instances where families have come in and, you know, language has been an issue, but just having the microscope, say, and looking down the microscope and just kind of discovering what's there, you know, has been enough. We did have a budget for translation, actually, and language support. We haven't ended up using it, to be honest, because we've just struggled to kind of identify opportunities where we could put that to use. So that was something we kind of communicated to the teachers at the schools, but the schools generally are quite keen for children to be, you know, advancing in English. So generally the focus is on, you know, helping children learn English rather than, you know, kind of providing additional language support in a context like that.
Yeah, and Zora has asked here, did you find that after the school day, children would rather play freely instead of engaging in organised activities?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I was expecting that, and there were definitely a couple of sessions where you could see some children were just there to let off steam and hang out with their friends. But I didn't see that as much as I expected. I actually saw children being very focused. I mean, the craft activities were incredible, weren't they, Fee? That we had to kind of, these poor parents would be like peeling their children away, you know, an hour later. They're just, it almost felt like that was the way they were almost recovering from the school day, was to just kind of just totally absorb themselves in, you know, soil painting or you know, making a collage, and that was actually really helping them just kind of wind down from the school day. So I actually think we saw that energy being dissipated in a kind of in a different way. And generally the after school sessions took place in the school hall, or we did try and do some outside when the weather allowed. So there were opportunities for you know, kind of children to move around and, you know, be physical if they wanted to.
But they were really highly engaged, you know, throughout. You didn't see any that were, you know, not finishing an activity. They would stick to it. And sometimes I did see parents wanting to get the children to go off home, and they were like, no, we want to do this or finish it, you know, so it was quite good.
That's great. And so Claire has a question about ages. She says, what was the engagement like from older children? Did you work with older siblings of primary school kids? And outside of the remit of this project, how might you extend some of this to older age brackets, teenagers, etc.?
Yes, interesting. So like I said, our focus was on year 1, year 2 of the sessions, and that was definitely the age group, the kind of families with children, you know, aged kind of about 5 to 9 years, that would come into the sessions. But obviously you'd see younger siblings and older siblings, but generally it would be primary school age. So definitely less older children. But what I did notice is one of the schools was very good at promoting the benefits in terms of science learning and thinking about, you know, for those year 5, year 6 children that were starting to think about secondary school and going on to secondary school, thinking about science. And, you know, so we would see some older children that came specifically to use the microscope, for example, because they wanted to get, you know, a better idea of what it'd be like to, you know, study biology and thinking about their secondary school choices. And in terms of working with secondary schools, I mean, I've worked with secondary schools in the past, but a lot more with primary schools. And I always think Key Stage 3 is is quite a strong opportunity, because teachers are often quite keen to inspire children about science and encourage them to continue science after Key Stage 3. So often these kind of exciting activities that, you know, can kind of give you a different flavour about science can be, you know, quite valuable. So that I would say is kind of where I'd probably target it. And interestingly, A level can also be 16 to 18 years, not necessarily A level, also other 16 to 18 qualifications can be a good opportunity, because there tends to be a lot more field work at 16 to 18 years than 11 to 18, sorry, 11 to 16. So that again can surprisingly be an opportunity, and there's often more extracurricular opportunities there. So for example, young people looking to gain work experience, you know, that will help them with their you know, uni or apprenticeship applications. So I would say those are 2 areas I'd probably look to extend the project.
And I think, like, older children are really curious as to, you know, what the younger children are doing, and they don't, personally as an ex-teacher, they don't often get that opportunity for craft activities or even like bug collecting. So they're really fascinated by it. And, you know, they were joining in with all of the activities. And some of the other things that I did to extend learning was talking about food chains and food webs and, you know, predators and prey, and, you know, introducing more scientific vocabulary even to those younger children. But they're definitely, you know, the older children really enjoyed doing those activities. They really did.
Definitely.
Great. And Belle is asking, I'm interested to know more about how you measure the impact of this engagement. Do you measure attitude, knowledge, and behavior changes regarding biodiversity, or focus more on the access side / social equity aspects?
Yeah, so this is very much an impact project rather than a research project. So certainly in my previous projects that have been much more research focused, I would be pretty much always doing a pre-intervention, post-intervention measure of knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, behavioral change, although that would normally be behavioral intention to change behavior, etc. But this project, because of the audience we were working with, and the challenge in terms of ethics, permission, the fact we knew a lot of families just wouldn't want to, you know, kind of sign an ethics agreement, and also the fact we didn't know how many families we'd be working with, which families they would be, you know, it was very unpredictable. So the kind of research element of this project hasn't been, you know, a kind of focus really. It's been much more about the engagement. But certainly, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned for how this would kind of inform research. And I think what is very clear is it would need a very qualitative approach. So whereas I've used a very mixed methods approach in previous educational projects, with this I would go for a very focused qualitative approach, which is much more on researcher as participants, so much more ethnographic approach based on interviews, listening, watching, rather than, you know, the kind of psychometric scales, the kind of questionnaires, and other tools that I've used in projects in the past.
Yeah, and we've got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to go for 2 more questions, and then I think we might have to wrap up before 6. So Amy says, did you have any issues with families that don't engage very much with the school itself? And did this help in any way with engagement?
Oh, really good question. The honest answer is I'm not sure about that. yes, that's something I'd have to discuss with the schools. I know the schools have been very pleased with how good the uptake has been. And yes, what I can tell you is but certainly, I mean, there's been some events where there's been pretty much every family from the class, hasn't there, Fee? So I'd say just going by that alone, it sounds like you know, we might be reaching some of the families that wouldn't normally come into school, and I think that's the strength of a kind of extracurricular activity like this. Is it's often a less daunting kind of opportunity to come into school for than, you know, kind of discussing your child's progress, or, you know, the kind of more typical opportunities that might be available.
But I think, you know, some of the events, the teachers weren't expecting many parents to turn up, but we actually had the room was full, so it was really a pleasant surprise for all of us involved, really. So you'd like to think that we are reaching those hard to reach parents, but again, it would be interesting to find out more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was really effective. So, and so this is, I suppose, a great question to end on from Karen. And she says, has there been any interest from parents or schools in taking this forwards without your intervention, or I suppose after your intervention?
Quite honestly, I'd say there hasn't, because the project's just been too short. And I think that's something really important to flag up with, you know, a short project like this. And it's something we're very much aware of, is that it takes time to build relationships. And I would say we're at the point where we've built some good relationships with families, but it's, you know, to kind of move on to that next stage, I think is a project in itself. I think it's certainly given the two schools lots of ideas moving forwards of kind of different approaches, you know, for biodiversity learning. Yeah, so Fee, do you want to add anything?
I think certainly at St. Peter's, Paddy, the deputy head there, was very interested in anything, you know, like this. If there were any other opportunities, he would be jumping on the opportunity to, you know, continue working with that kind of those kind of activities. But yeah, it would be great to think that they would. And I know schools in that area, if there's anything that is being offered to them, they will usually snap it up, because they are just thinking about the opportunities the children are experiencing. So they want to give as much as they can to these, you know, families who don't get out into nature as much as maybe they would like to.
I know we did have a parent who went on to do lots of litter picking.
Oh yes,
with his daughter
from Marlborough Primary. She was really enthused, and they sent in videos to Devon Wildlife Trust to show that she'd been all over the city and set up a little organisation within the local community to start litter picking, because she was inspired by, I think, with me going in, and I wasn't talking about litter necessarily, but just, you know, mentioning how important it is that we look after our natural spaces. So litter, we need to make sure it all goes in the bin. But, you know, it was lovely. It was really gave us all a lovely feeling to see that she'd, you know, taken that under her own wing, and her dad was really supportive of that as well. So,
oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think that pretty much brings us to the end. I think we've managed to reach all of the questions in the chat. So I'll just ask if there are any sort of final points you want to add before we wrap up the recording.
No, I've been really amazed by people's questions, what interesting and pertinent questions people have asked. So thank you for such an interesting discussion, everyone. And, you know, thank you for kind of taking the time to listen to our project. And I just want to say a massive thank you to the schools that have been involved, to Fiona and other people from Devon Wildlife Trust and our other partners. We really couldn't have done it without everybody that's been involved. So watch this space. I forgot to put my contact details in my presentation, but if you look me up, you'll get my YouTube page and, you know, email and so on. So do get in touch, follow me on X, etc. If you want to find out more about projects like this. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sophie, for doing such an amazing job of facilitating and managing to keep up with all those questions, because that's a whole skill set in itself.
No, thank you. And I mean, there's time now if you'd like to add your contact details in the chat.
Oh yes, good idea.
There are some people that would love to stay in touch. So yeah, like you said, I'm glad we were able to generate some really interesting discussions, and hopefully everyone was able to take away something inspiring from our speaker today. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar is the third in a summer series of 3. Our first was with Trenton Schultz-Franco from the Special Bird Service, talking about making nature more accessible to marginalised communities through bird watching. And last week we heard from Judy Ling Wong, who you also mentioned in tonight's presentation. And Judy Ling Wong is from the Black Environment Network. And she was talking about how EDI can be a step towards global collaboration. So all 3 of our talks, including this evening's, will be available on our YouTube channel and our website, and recordings will be circulated to the registered emails. So please feel free to share with anyone who you think would be interested. And also following these webinars, we will be writing up a summary of the topics discussed, and I'll be presenting those at the IUCN Regional Conservation Forum in Bruges in autumn this year, along with our summary position statement from our webinar series last year. So thank you again to our fantastic speakers this evening, Bethan Stagg and Fiona Blake as well. And thank you all for attending this webinar. We really appreciate your time and your input, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sophie and Fee. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.